Hey there, good morning. Welcome to the JeepSolid garage. So today we're going to be putting the transmission back in on my Project Jeep PJ. This is all part of a video series where I replaced the clutch on PJ. Last step is dropping this transmission back in. Do you drop it back in or you put it back in? I guess you put it back in. Clutch is all installed. Transmission is ready to go back in. All we got to do is get a little bit of grease on the input shaft here, where this goes into the pilot bearing. Our throwout bearing is replaced, and videos on all this is actually linked in the description below, a whole video series on how to do this. A little bit of grease on this. All right, transmission is all set, input shaft is greased up. We can go ahead and shimmy this into place. I think I'm gonna just put you guys on time lapse because it's gonna take me a while to shimmy this into place on my own. It's a little bit of a battle. Much better with two people. My transmission jack down here will definitely help, but let's give it a shot. This transmission jack works pretty good. You know, I should probably get this light off the clutch. Helper would be super handy. I'm actually gonna have to drop the engine down a little bit to make this work. Oh, and the exhaust, yeah. Oh, this is gonna be a pain. My exhaust is disconnected, but I've got it on a jack stand down here. But it's a little bit in the way. The exhaust is still in the way a little bit. This is where it gets tricky, where you can't see what you're doing. Input shaft into clutch. And this is the battle of getting the transmission seated properly, the input shaft into the center of the clutch there. But your bell housing's in the way here, so it makes it tough to see that the input shaft is going in correctly. And the other part of the problem is that the splines on the crank are lined up, or actually the splines on the clutch disc. Might have to turn the engine over by hand, which I'll show you guys how to do. So once it looks like it's going together nicely, we're actually going to take a bolt here and feed it through the bell housing into the engine and see if it'll kind of help pull it together. So I just used my transmission jack to kind of jack it up just a little bit more, because not only do you have to have it lined in straight, but the transmission angle has to line up with the angle of the engine so they go in together. So it's a little tricky. And there we go, got one bolt on each side threaded in appropriately, so we can just pull it together now. Alright, as I mentioned, not only are you trying to get the angle of the transmission and the angle of the engine straight, but on the sides of the bell housing, just look at those bolt holes, the holes of the bell housing that, or the bolts that you took out, that the holes are getting lined up straight, and that shield over the flywheel, there's a couple studs on the engine that need to line up on that shield. Get all those in place. Just kind of really look around the edges, make sure everything's lined up easy, and it'll snug in tightly. If you're just having a lot of trouble getting it to pull in at all, it might be that you need to turn the crank just a little bit, because the splines on the clutch could be off from mating in with that input shaft on the transmission. Let me show you how to just turn the crank a little bit. So on our engine here, right down there at the bottom, there's our vibration damper, and there's a bolt right in the center there. We're going to get a wrench on that and just give it a little, 1/16 of a turn, maybe, just not very much. Doesn't have to go very far to change the splines. Okay, so now we've overcome like the biggest obstacle of this job, just getting the transmission in the proper place. Now we just have to hook up the shift lever, what else? Get the drive shafts, the crank position sensor, some of the wiring, the vent, and then get the skid plate, all that back on. If you want like a detailed view of how to do that, it's essentially the reverse of removal. If you look back at the removal video, all that's linked in the description below, that whole video series. If you want to watch a longer view of me wrestling the transmission back into place, there was actually a live stream that I just did. I do live streams on Wednesdays. Live stream on August 2nd. You can check that out. It's just Wednesday mornings I do live stream. Gives me a chance to hang out and visit with you guys, chat a bit. You can kind of see me working on a project. But I think I'm going to wrap it up right now. Check out my next video right up here. Thank you guys for watching and have a good day. Let's try a left-handed hat toss here. Wow, that was way off.